Hi there.
Hello.
You have reached the pinnacle of cool. You have a Monet video made for you. That is okay. You have officially like all kinds of testifying here. You have reached the pinnacle of cool. You can get cooler, but like there you are. That's amazing. So how are
She's
you?
extraordinary.
Yeah, she is. She is. So how are you doing?
I'm well. I have to start by actually doing something I've been instructed by my siblings to do. So when I told them I was coming to South by Southwest, they were very proud of me. When I told them I was going to be in conversation with MK Jemisin, my cool points went up because you were one of our family book club selections. So my brothers and sisters, there are six of us. We have a book club, and your Broken Earth trilogy was one of our selections, as was The City We Became. So you just need to know that the street cred among the Abrams clan is high for N.K. Jemisin.
Okay. Well, all of my friends are like, you have to say hi to her for me. So that would take up the entire session if I did that for every single one of my friends. But yes, everyone that I know is super excited that I got the chance to talk to you. I am super excited that I've gotten the chance to talk to you. I am super fangirling right now, and I'm trying to hold it down, stay cool, but it might slip. It might slip. All right. Well, so I have some questions of my own, and then we've got a few questions, which, as they mentioned, were pre-sourced from the South by Southwest audience. So let's get right into it. I did not realize you were a romance author until relatively recently. So I've got to catch up on reading all of your work. But one of the things that I thought was amazing was that the romance community just immediately and unequivocally and proudly proclaimed that you were one of theirs. That was how I found out, where they were like, "Oh, by the way, she writes romance." Um, so I have nothing but admiration for the billion-dollar industry that is romance. How did romance writing help you enter politics?
I wouldn't say it helped me enter politics, but it has always informed how I do my job, all of them.
Mm,
I'm a writer because I love words. I think, like you, storytelling is innate. When I was a third
mm,
year in law school, I wanted to write an espionage novel, but this was back in '99, and
nice.
women were not being published as espionage writers, certainly not a black
Mm,
woman. And my heroine
mm,
was a black chemical physicist who was going to unravel this very complicated, uh, you know, intensive story. So I talked to some friends who were in publishing, said, "Here's this book I want to publish," and they were like, "Yeah, you're not going to get that published." And I did my first.
mm.
So one of my first rules for myself is, okay, they say no one way, figure out another way to do it. So I made My Spies Fall in Love, killed the same number of people, but I got it published as romantic suspense. And for me, that if I if I think about how this is imported into my political career, it's that you may want to do something one way, and you may have your eyes, your sights set on it. You may have an entire orchestration, but it may not work out the way you intend. But that doesn't relieve you of the responsibility. And I needed to tell that story. I wanted to write that book, and so I just had to find a different way to do it. It may not be the traditional way, but I still got it done. And seven novels followed it. So I did 8 romantic suspense novels. They all got published, and I got to tell my stories.
And you got to kill the same number of people.
I did. Lots of mayhem.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I am super looking forward to these. So, just because I'm a writer and I'm going to throw you under the bus here, can you give me a pitch for your latest book?
Actually, I
30
have one
seconds or
coming out
less.
May. Okay, one coming out
Ooh,
May 11th. It's a story of a law clerk who finds out that she holds the guardianship for an ailing Supreme Court justice who's fallen into a coma, and she has to decide whether to let him live or die, and unravel a political scheme that is trying to take his life and possibly hers.
okay, I'm in. I'm in. You just sold it to me. That was not that hard. All right. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. What's it called?
It's called While Justice Sleeps, and it will be out on May 11th from Doubleday.
Nice. Okay, I'm looking forward to it. All right. So, next question. A few months
Okay.
ago, I posted a thread on Twitter about how politics is another form of storytelling, and how I felt that Democrats needed to do a better job of using storytelling to help ordinary Americans kind of see that democracy and a social safety net are good for them. What are your thoughts on the political power of storytelling?
I think you're absolutely right. One of the reasons I believe I've been successful is that rather than give people talking points, I try to tell a story of where we are and where we
Mm,
can go. But you often have to bring in, you start in the middle of the story, medias res, but you can't leave
mm,
behind how you got there. And so, whether it's the work we
mm,
do with Fair Fight to convince people to access their right to vote, the work we
mm,
did with my organization, Fair Count, to include them in the census, the work we do through the Southern Economic Advancement Project, or SEEP, which really focuses on how we translate progressive policy into Southern. It's all about telling a story, but you have to center the voter, center the citizen, center the person in that narrative. If it's about someone else and they can't see themselves either benefiting from or being victimized by, then you give them a
mm,
reason not to pay attention. And so I've always tried to
mm.
make my work about centering the communities that need to be heard, especially those who are never part of the narrative, unless they are seen as the villain or as an impediment to others' success. And so by centering not only those communities, but centering those narratives, we create space for other people to tell better stories by going to the polls, by being involved, by being civically engaged.
Right. All right. Well, along those lines, as you've said, a key measure of your success has been in talking to audiences that have traditionally been ignored by traditional politics. And so, we know at this point, for example, that the country's political leadership um, generally kind of just doesn't think of certain communities as being particularly important. How do we make it clear to the political leadership that the voters they've ignored up until this point are the ones that they should actually be focusing on?
Well, I have a current example of that. It's not a positive story,
Do
but it
tell.
is proof of relevance. In 2020, 2021, we worked to engage the single highest number of communities of color as active voters in Georgia in the state's history. And as a result,
Mhm.
we helped deliver the state of Georgia to a Democratic candidate for president for the first time in 28 years. We elected the first Jewish senator from Georgia and the first Black senator from Georgia. We did it by telling them a story about their power, that if they wanted relief
Mm,
from COVID, if they wanted access to voting rights, if they want criminal justice reform that is real, if they want policing reform, these are the things they need to do. They need to show up to vote. They need to make a plan, bring their families. They listened. And now we have 253 bills going across the country trying to undo their performance. Here in Georgia, more than 50
mm,
bills have been introduced to roll back access to voting rights. And so part of the responsibility is to not just tell a chapter of the story, but to come back and tell people what happens next. It is irresponsible for politicians and political leaders to simply pretend they don't know, or when they learn, to try to gaslight the communities into believing it's their fault that bad things happen.
mm,
Our responsibility as citizens is to not only do the piece of getting them elected, but then doing the part of holding them accountable. I like to describe it, we protest in the streets, we protest at the ballot box, but then we have to protest in the halls of power, because in between elections is when life happens. And that's the life that we have to live with. So we need to be always present in the faces and in the minds of those in charge and those who support those in charge to ensure that we get the best that society has to offer.
mm. We shouldn't have to agitate that constantly, but we do.
Well, I'm going to push
Um,
back on that. If I
okay,
can, NK,
sure.
politics is about self-preservation and it's about
Mm,
creating the world you want to see. If we don't
mm,
elect people who see us in that world, then we should not be surprised that they try to draw us out of the narrative. That's why
mm,
constant attention and agitation is so necessary, because there isn't this thing where it's just about us, it's about everyone. And people have different needs, they have different wants, they have different notions of power. agitation is how we make certain that our needs get included in this larger narrative. Rarely will anyone get everything they want, but we get more of what we need when we stay present, because we can't presume that those who do not have our experiences are going to have our needs at the top of their mind. And so agitation is actually, I think, an activist way of saying, I'm not going away, and I'm not going to let you forget me because you did one thing for me and now you're done. I'm going to stay in your face because this is my country, this is my state, this is my city, this is my community, and I deserve your constant attention.
All right. Amen. Okay. So no, exactly right. You're exactly right. Next question. I have been doing a lot of thinking about genius in the last few months, partly because of the MacArthur thing. It seems to me that someone like you, who is a lawyer, a CEO, an obvious polymath who has proven her mastery of the arts of both literature and politics, you easily qualify as a genius yourself. But there is a deep discomfort. Yeah, you do. I'm officially a genius. I can declare other people geniuses if I want. But it seems to me that there is a deep discomfort in the collective unconscious of this country with the idea of Blackness as paired with genius. Do you believe that this collective discomfort has affected you in any way?
I think there's a
Or
constancy
impacted your
of,
career?
I jokingly refer to my trajectory as sort of an asymptote of success. I get really, really close to crossing the line, but never quite getting over it. And even in this present moment, I have been nothing less than blessed and benefited, and I've been able to do more of what I want. But it came about because of an act of perfidy by someone in power who decided people who looked like me weren't supposed to be as active and proactive in their politics, that it was okay to deny their voices. Now, I've no guarantee, and I cannot prove I would have won that election, but I know that the blockage of so many thousands of voices certainly had an impact on the outcome, as was proven when we were able to remove some of those impediments in 21 and in 2020. And so to your point, I do believe that there have been opportunities that I've either been denied or, just haven't been able to reach. But I don't see that as an excuse for my behavior. I have things I have to do. I've got to get better, faster, stronger. But yes, there is absolutely a discomfiture with the audacity of Black minds, the audacity of people of color, thinking we belong in spaces, declaring we deserve to have access. I mean, let's look at last year, 2020, when the conversation about the VP-ship was happening. I had no claim to becoming vice president of the United States. Never thought I would, never thought I did. But what I was chastised for was refusing to demur and pretend that I didn't have the capacity to do the job because I don't have the titles and the positions that the people we're used to seeing have. There have only been 2 Black women senators in American history. There's never been a Black woman governor. Those are the 2 jobs that usually are the predicates for getting that next job. And so instead of my response being seen as a validation of what I've accomplished and what I know my capacity is, I instead face this sort of onslaught of, oh my God, she's ambitious and clawing, and she's, it's performative. I mean, there were all these insults as opposed to looking at the fundamentals, which I was asked a question white men don't get asked. Are you qualified?
Hello.
I was asked a question very few people have to contend with. Why should you get it? And for me, the inverse of that question is those of us who have benefited from intelligence, access, and delivery, we have an affirmative obligation to declare not only for ourselves, but for those who look like us and are situated like us, that yes, we are capable. Yes, it is possible. Yes, it should be conceivable. Because if we say no, if we declare that we are less than, we give more permission for that false narrative to continue.
And the fact that people actually fix their mouths to say that in the middle of the Trump administration is super rich. Okay, deep breaths, deep breaths. All right, I have a fun question. Who would you have play you in the movie of your life?
I I can say I don't know. I will tell you probably two of the most fun actors that I have seen, I've been able to interact with directly. I love Ashley Nicole Black. She is hilarious.
Mm.
And I think
Hmm.
her witticism and her comfort with who she is an extraordinary thing. Um, she's a little bit older than I am, but I think, depending on what I eventually do or become, I think Viola Davis is just one of those extraordinary actors that
Mm.
could play any role anytime. And what is so delightful about her is that her activism is more than performative. It is true and deep and rich. And so, if they wanted to come together and do, imitations of life, I would love to watch a movie where they pretended to be me for a second. Although yeah, I don't want anyone to think that I think that there should be a movie of my life just yet.
I'm sure someone somewhere is planning it. They better be. They really better be. Okay. So writer stuff again. As you know, a typical narrative arc starts with a setup where there's usually an inciting incident, rising action and tension, a climax, and then the tension falls as the story reaches resolution. So let's say there's a hypothetical piece of proposed legislation out there that sounds helpful. It's supposed to restore faith in American democracy by preventing large numbers of people from voting. So, how do we explain the real effects of this legislation to the voters as a story using a narrative arc?
Well, I do this with fifth graders. I have them have a conversation. So there has
Mhm.
been a law proposed to outlaw peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at school. And Tommy has brought a sandwich to school because it's his favorite sandwich. And unfortunately, he has been caught. And
Mm.
there's now a law being proposed to say that if Tommy does it again, his parents go to jail and he gets kicked out of school. Who has the right to decide whether you get to have peanut butter and jelly in your school? And so we have to have a
Mm.
debate about whether peanut butter and jelly puts his friend Erica at risk or not. But does he have the permanent right to have his favorite sandwich, especially if he's hungry? We have to
Mm.
follow this bill and we have to understand that there are going to be the cashew farmers who want to take down Big Peanut, that there are peanut farmers who understand that the poverty of peanut farming, that losing peanuts will mean that the butters become more expensive. And we have a governor who has to decide if she will sign that bill or not. It is the right of voters to decide whether peanuts will rise again or if cashews will become the nut of the future.
Okay. I'm hoping that you're going to actually write this now as a children's thriller, or something like that, because I'm invested now in the saga of Big Peanut and whether Big Peanut will take over the world.
I will say I've done this with
This is
kids. I've done this with kids, and they are all,
uh,
I mean, they're fifth graders, and so they are barely interested in my presence, let alone my narrative for them. By the end of the exercise, you've got these kids yelling with each other. I picked two of them out to be lobbyists. They get in it, and they make up these stories of what happened to their cousin because he had a nut allergy. It's amazing.
oh
But yes, I
no.
believe I've created some voters out there.
Or an ongoing war about peanuts versus cashews.
There you go.
um, hopefully they'll resolve it legislatively.
Exactly.
All right. So let's see. I think we have time for that question. The current media landscape seems to privilege the appearance, but not necessarily the substance, of balance and civility. Presentation of facts without implications, elevating disinformation to the same status of truth, all of that. Right now, there are a lot of new Democratic candidates energized by the 2020 election who are seeking public office on the local, state, and national level. What's your best motivational or aspirational narrative for these new candidates running for office in this environment? Or TLDR, how do we get candidates to not just make pleasant diplomatic promises, but also give real talk on how they plan to accomplish it?
We have to meet people where they are, not where we want them to be. And one of the reasons new media, social media, door knocking, all of those ways of communication exist, is that it's our responsibility to find the method that gets to the greatest number of people. When I ran for governor, I did debate, I did television, but we also were on Spotify, we were on Pandora, but I did Dragon Con, I went to a gun show, I did one music fest, I did the So So Def concert. We also had commercials on country radio. And part of this is for we convince ourselves that we can only be elected by this narrow sliver of universe that we can conceive of. My belief, so number one, you have to take advantage of every medium for communication. But the second is you can't tell yourself no. Don't decide for the voters that they don't want you. I may not convince everyone at a gun show to support me, but I might get a couple of them to give me a little bit of side eye, and a few more might go home and mention me to someone else, and that person decides to vote for me. But so often we not only box ourselves out of the narrative, we tell other people they're not allowed to listen to us. I want you to hear me and decide you don't want what I'm selling. I don't want to be the one to tell you you can't even have it. And so for new candidates, especially those who have progressive values, part of our responsibility is to share what we know, to invite others in, and to recognize that compromise is not evil. As long as you can compromise your approach, you don't compromise your values. I don't do that. But I will have conversations about the approaches I'm willing to take if my values remain strong. And this notion that you have to get everything you want or it's not worth acting ignores humanity. It doesn't work when you're 3, it doesn't work when you're 30, and it doesn't work when you're in politics. Because ultimately, society is about each of us getting something that we need by giving up something that we want. And that doesn't disappear when you're running for office. What's important is that we know what we can't give up, and those are the things we defend. But everything else has to be open to conversation if we want to get any progress.
Okay. Amen. I think we have enough time for my favorite question, which is, has your time as a Supernatural fan given you any insight into managing viewer or voter expectations with regard to outcomes?
Okay, so Eric Kripke is amazing. And I love Supernatural. I also love the too soon departed Timeless. The actors, Jared and Misha and, oh, good God. I just blanked on Dane's name. And oh my God, Dane. Jared.
I'm blanking too. Oh my gosh.
Sweet Lord. I love him. He is so incredible. Anyway, my point is, Dean, please forgive me. My point is that our responsibility, the point of Supernatural has always been to say that things are never quite what we imagine, and that we are going to fail and stumble in our pursuits, but we are responsible for trying again, and that we should never try alone. That every time Dean or Sam, whenever they tried to go by them, or Castiel, whenever they tried to go alone, things failed. Jensen Ankles, that's his name. Good God, I was like, I can't remember Jensen's name. Anyway, that we are responsible for going together, but also that sometimes you don't ask for permission, you just ask for forgiveness. And ultimately that our responsibility is to tell the best story possible to get to the next frame, to get to the next episode, to get to the next victory.
All right. That is a perfect end to my nerdy questions. So now let's move on to the questions that we sourced from South by Southwest attendees. Okay, so the first one is coming from Diana, who asks, what do you think the next generation should focus on when approaching current issues with our political environment?
Thank you, Diana. We have to keep our eyes on the fundamentals. When people have a chance to actually participate in making choices, they tend to make better choices. But when you are told either through word or deed that your voice doesn't matter, you start to not only diminish your participation, you start to diminish your belief in yourself. That's why I fight for voting rights. it's not about the act of voting. Okay, yeah, you get to cast a ballot. It's about the act of choosing. It's about the power to decide what my future looks like. And I would say to every voter and to anyone thinking about running for office, our responsibility is to ensure the foundation of participation, because we can overwhelm them with our presence. We can overwhelm them with our demands. We can fix the world if enough of us who want the world to be actually show up and demand that it be so.
All right. Okay, so the next question then is from Francis. How can other states take the example of what you and your team did in Georgia and apply it to their issues? I am a new resident of Austin, Texas, and I cannot believe the voter suppression tactics in this state.
So what Fair Fight did in 2019 and 2020, we actually operated in 20 different states working on voter suppression, including Texas. But we've got to remember that voter suppression is one part of the equation. The work that we were able to do in Georgia started a decade ago, and it was focusing on voter suppression, but also voter engagement, because you can make it easier to vote, but you still have to do the work of convincing people it's worth casting a vote, because it's not the moment suppression ends that people decide to vote. One of the most pernicious parts of voter suppression is it convinces you it's not worth trying. And what is often dismissed as voter apathy is usually just despair. And so we have to focus on voter suppression, which is what Fair Fight continues to do, both in Georgia, and we have been working with and supporting organizations across the country on this issue. But we also have to build political infrastructure that actually talks to people where they are and repeatedly, because you're trying to undo sometimes generational distrust. And then the third thing is we've got to get good people to run for office. Because if you keep electing the same charlatans, even though they may speak your language, you're going to keep not getting the solutions that you need. And so sometimes it means running yourself. Other times it means running campaigns so good people will win. But always it means being engaged and holding every elected leader accountable, whether they like you or not.
I am super feeling you on that despair and distrust. I have relatives who I've tried to have conversations with about, and some of them are just so, it doesn't make a difference. There's no point. And yeah, it makes a huge difference. So I am going to try and use that myself. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and that one will be from Erica. How do you deal with the emotional drain that comes with being so passionate about a cause and all the pushback that comes with diversity and inclusion movements, especially when you are the only person in the room that looks like you?
You grow up in the South. Sorry, that was snarky.
But
so
truth.
It is true. I mean, look, I talk about being a daughter of the South, both as a celebration, but also as an explanation. I grew up in a place that, had a flag that was flown by the people who went to war to keep my ancestors enslaved. When I say ancestors, I'm talking about my great, great, great grandparents. So not so far removed. My responsibility, though, is not to focus on their dismissal of my humanity. My responsibility is to focus on the fight for my right to not to party, but for my right to participate, my right to be heard. Janelle said it in the song, I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I'm determined. But determination requires that you give yourself permission to sometimes just shut down, give yourself permission to lose, give yourself permission to grieve, but then give yourself the responsibility to get back up. But if you skip any of those steps, something else is going to happen. And that paralysis is usually what captures us and keeps us from getting good done.
That sounds like the perfect point to end this conversation on. So thank you very much. This has been an honor. And I'm just going to say, that's it. Okay, goodbye. Nice meeting you. Hopefully we will at some point have a chance to meet outside of this. I look forward to it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.